a lot of people think the Fed that they think the economy is going to fall off a cliff in 2024 and unemployment's going to spike. I think the last reading on unemployment was 3.7, I believe. What number do you think catches the Fed's attention? 4, 4.3, 4.5, 5%? What do you think? Because again, 3.7 is historically low. Full employment when I was getting my degree was 6%. Now it's 5%. Do you have a number you think where the Fed goes, ooh, that hurts?
I think there used to be, but I don't think the Federal Reserve looks at it like they did at one time.
Oh,
See, there was a
okay.
time that the Federal Reserve would look at the employment and how many people were working or the how many people weren't working in order to adjust the inflation scenario that was taking place into the future. Because if more people are working, more people have money to start spending it into the economy, you got money velocity starting to take place. So if you have low unemployment, that ultimately would start leading into higher inflation, right? So if the Federal Reserve was looking for low inflation or high inflation, they would start screwing with the economy in a way that the unemployment would rise or fall, right? In order to create the inflation scenario going into the future that they were projecting or wanting, like that 2% or whatever it was. That was, a lot of people will refer to this as like the Phillips curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the more employment you got, the higher
Yep.
inflation, and then there's this curve too. Okay, so
Correct.
that's kind of been like discredited, saying that it doesn't work anymore. And we kind of see that taking place because really we've had pretty much, other than the short period of the pandemic, we've had historically low unemployment for a very long time.
Yeah.
Right. And it still
Mm-hmm.
didn't create the inflation scenario that the Federal Reserve was looking for, even with the low employment towards the end of, like, say, the Trump administration or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I don't know if people remember that we had low unemployment and there was no inflation, right? The Fed should be printing money. This was all coming towards the end of the Trump administration during that time. So I don't think the Federal Reserve is really worried about the unemployment like they once were. Like they would want unemployment to rise to bring inflation down.
Mm.
And I don't think they look at it like that anymore. They can keep
Okay.
unemployment extremely hot or very, like the jobs market elevated without the
Yeah.
risk of running inflation too hot because they've learned that the Phillips curve is no longer applying to the economy like it once did.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I
I don't
think
know.
so. I think so. Something I've shared to my audience, and I do believe, is I don't think the Fed bats an eye unless unemployment goes above 4 or 5. Right?
And that's where, yeah, and I would agree. Like that's like that was kind of like the old Fed view.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think now, like, they were concerned about running labor too hot before
Correct.
and
Yes.
creating an inflation scenario. I don't think they're worried about that anymore. They're like, fuck it, just let it run. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cuss. They're like,
That's
just
okay.
screw it, just let it run hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think.
all the time, and we don't have to worry about whether or not that's going to create the inflation scenario like we had expected in the past.
Yeah.
So like the unemployment rising, this would be like the typical move for the Federal Reserve to adjust interest rates. Like once the unemployment rises and people are like, dude, this is too painful. We can't experience, we need to go to work, whatever. That's when the Federal Reserve would try and stimulate the economy with the lower of interest rates. And then hopefully people would start borrowing money to get the economy moving again. And then people would start getting hired.
Mm-hmm.
I think now they're not worried about that. Like, I think that kind of fear in trying to manipulate interest rates to adjust the unemployment rate is kind of left their
Okay.
strategy.
I like it. I like it.